So we're going to test this out. They've changed a few things since the last time I did a stream, so got to make sure it's actually working. It'd be kind of silly to sit here and talk to myself for an hour or 2 hours, however long this goes, and it'd be unfortunate if it wasn't streaming, so just want to make sure that it actually works. It says it's live, just got the alert. I'm going to confirm here real quick. I'm doing this. Yep, it's live. Perfect. I'm doing this because someone asked me to in one of the comments on a video I posted, just saying, hey, I'd like you to talk about the GH5 kind of in your long form stream format that you used to do. And I am happy to oblige this one person who asked for it. And hopefully they see this. If not, no worries. Welcome, whoever you are. I'm going to talk about the LUMIX GH6. This camera right here. I'm actually streaming from a GH5 right now. I'm not using the live stream function of the GH5 Mark II. I'm just doing a stream through OBS to YouTube, but I want to talk about the GH6. If you want to look at the video quality of a GH5, it might look something like this, although that's streamed. It is a vlog with like the basic LUT applied. So if you're curious what this camera is, it's a GH5. But obviously no color and it's not 4K and all that stuff. We're going to talk about the GH6 and why I really, really like this camera and why I think it's probably underrated. I feel like as all the Lumix cameras always have been. But also just to share some like the value that I get out of these cameras. I actually have two of them and I'm going to walk through two different kind of rigs. This is the kind of go-to rig that I've built for the GH6. And I have a secondary one that's kind of an alternate that I'll show you in a little bit. But I kind of want to walk through how I built this, how it's set up, and kind of why I like the GH6 personally. I had an A7S III that I sold. I tested the R5 a year or two ago when that came out. And finally, when the GH6 came out, it was a easy upgrade from the GH5, which I also adore and still use as I'm streaming with it. But the GH6 particularly, I think, is notable for a lot of reasons that I'll get into. First of all, this is a little bit bigger of a rig than I used to use, and it's a little heavy, a little cumbersome sometimes, but for the most part, it's still relatively lightweight. You can hold it with one hand, and you really don't get tired. I have the biggest accessory probably up at the top is the Atomos Shinobi, and I use the Atomos Shinobi because it doesn't have any internal recording. So I can monitor, I get all the benefits, but it's much more lightweight than some of the other Atomos products that are recorders, and I don't need to do that. Everything I record is internal on the GH6 currently. On the bottom, the other big accessory that's on here is the Anton Bauer Titan base extended battery. Basically, this is a giant battery brick on the bottom of the camera, and I really like it because even though it adds a little bit of weight, I never have to swap batteries. I can shoot an entire day without ever having to recharge, and it's powering the Atomos that's up top. So it's one battery that's charging the camera constantly. That's how I have it run with the USB right here to the side, because on the GH6 you can charge through the USB-C port. So the Anton is kind of USB-C into the camera, and then also a little P-tap up to a just dummy battery on the Atomos. And that works really, really well. One battery keeps everything charged for a full day of shooting, and I never have to worry about like, oh, the battery's about to die, or having different batteries for the Atomos and different batteries for the GH6 and tracking them down and keeping them all charged. One battery, just simplicity. It's such nice peace of mind. And I like that it's got, the mounting options on the bottom, so you can, plate it or whatever. And it's not a kind of typical traditional kind of big V-mount or gold mount battery where you're adding weight in like some strange position. I like that it goes right under the camera and keeps all the weight in the center of gravity kind of in balance. So of course I've got an HDMI cord going up to the Shinobi on top. That's mounted. All this stuff is mounted to a cage that I've got on here. It's the small rig Gh6 Cage. They may have multiple, but I have this one. It gives you some nice mounting options where you can add little things, if you want to mount a shotgun microphone. I'll show you in a little bit. But it just is a nice thing to have a cage around it. It doesn't really add any weight, and you can attach all these accessories. So I've got a few cables that kind of are annoying beyond like if you just had the camera, which, the GH6 is certainly a capable camera all on its own. I'm showing you kind of my optimal rig, but you could always strip it down and shoot a lot more basic, because a monitor is not, you know, the camera has a monitor built into it, right? So the larger 5-inch screen is a nice, valuable accessory, but I wouldn't say it's, you know, essential. You can get by with just the camera monitor if you have to, and then certainly the battery on the bottom. These Anton Bauer batteries have gone up in price quite a bit recently, so you know that's not something you need, but it is a nice to have feature. For the GH6 itself, why do I like this camera specifically? Well, a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons is that it has the anamorphic mode, and you might think that's for shooting anamorphic, but I actually don't use it that way. And this is kind of some secret sauce that I think a couple people are kind of figuring out. But if you have an anamorphic mode on a camera, so a red, an airy, a black magic, the GH6, the GH5 had it, even the GH4 had anamorphic. And some of the other Lumix cameras, maybe the G9 or something like that, some of the Lumix cameras have anamorphic, but it's not very common, because I think a lot of camera manufacturers are like, oh, that's just for cinema. Like, you just, only high-end productions need that. But here's the thing, anamorphic, really the way the GH6 does it, it's just filming the whole sensor. So it puts you into a 4:3 mode instead of a 16:9. So your aspect ratio is 4:3. It's a little bit more square. It's a little bit taller of a format. And what it's actually doing is just recording the whole sensor. If you think of it, the sensor in most cameras, especially hybrid DSLR, type cameras, is not a 16:9 sensor. So if you're recording 16:9, the camera is basically pre-cropping the footage for you, if you want to think of it that way. It's kind of a change in mindset, and I'll get to why this is important. So most cameras nowadays, if you're recording 16:9, the traditional television format, it's doing a pre-crop. It's trimming off the top and the bottom of the sensor information, and it's not recording that because it thinks you want 16:9. Here's the thing. A lot of platforms now are having vertical video. If you're posting on social media, vertical is where it's at. And you can film on a phone, and you can film vertical, but then you're stuck with vertical. And if you want to film horizontal, you have to turn the phone sideways, like I would do here, right? So you're like shooting vertical, and then you have to turn horizontal and then vertical. And you're always making that decision to, am I filming this horizontal? Am I filming it vertical? With a camera, you could do the same thing, right? You could turn that sideways, and that's kind of the benefit. But if you record 4:3 and you don't use an anamorphic lens, well, now you have this kind of interesting full sensor capture. It's called open gate. And basically open gate means you're recording the full sensor. So because the GH6 has this anamorphic mode, even though I'm not using an anamorphic lens, what I can do is I can film what I would normally get, the 16:9 footage, because remember, that's just the camera's just kind of pre-cropping the top and the bottom off anyway. So instead of pre-cropping, I'm recording all the information, and then in post-production, I have this extra vertical headroom and bottom room, whatever you want to call it, at the top and the bottom of the frame, where you can use that for those social media vertical slices. So instead of having to film extra wide or do anything, strange because you're limited to 16:9, an inherently horizontal format, the frame is wider than it is tall. When you switch to filming 4:3, you're in a more square aspect ratio. It's not truly square, but it's 4:3. It's a little bit more proportioned on the horizontal and vertical. And so you have this really nice benefit where you can basically shoot 16:9 as you always would. You're not sacrificing anything. You're still getting the exact same content. But what you're gaining is that extra top and bottom that every other camera is basically throwing away. And this is one of the unique benefits of the Lumix cameras, in that they allow you to do this. Most common hybrid, cheap, affordable consumer cameras don't allow you to record any kind of anamorphic. There might be some rare exceptions that I'm unaware of, but for the most part, they think you want 16:9 because 16:9 is HD or 4K. But if you want to shoot for traditional platforms, 16:9, but you also want to be able to make cuts for social media, well, it's really, really helpful to have the full sensor data, and you have your 16:9 just fine, but then you also have that safety padding at the top and the bottom for your vertical stuff. You don't really have to change anything. The GH6 even has frame guides built in to where you can monitor right on the screen. You don't even need the Atomos. You have frame guides right in the menu system where you can frame for 16:9, shoot for 16:9 like you always would, but now you have this added benefit. And the anamorphic mode is technically higher resolution than the 4K mode anyway. So you actually get like better quality if that's what you're going for. So that's one of the unique benefits of the GH6. But even the GH5 would do it. Even the GH4 could do that. So if it's something that you're interested in and you just want to experiment with it, play around, pick up a used GH4. Shoot some anamorphic stuff. Don't use an anamorphic lens. That defeats the purpose of this benefit. I mean, you can shoot anamorphic, which is nice as well, right? If you do want to shoot with a anamorphic lens, they have the new nanomorph lenses from Laowa, Venus Optics, or however that branding is. There's a lot of cool anamorphic options that are coming out that are budget friendly, and so you can shoot the CinemaScope ultra wide aspect ratios if you want. But if you're doing something more of a hybrid platform approach where you want to be on YouTube, but you also want to do YouTube Shorts, you want to do TikTok, but you also want to make a spot for television, like you're not limited. It basically opens up the flexibility, and you can do all your cropping and post-production, and you've got all the full sensor data, which again, most affordable cameras aren't doing. And if you really, if you have a Red or a Blackmagic or an Arri or something, yeah, you have an anamorphic mode and you could do it. But most of those cameras are not as portable and handheld as, a GH5 or a GH6 would be. And so you're limited in how you can film. So it's like the perfect hybrid for me between like, it's definitely a step up from a cell phone and a smartphone, but it's not the, crazy high-end, expensive, really big, bulky rigs. Even though they've gotten smaller over the years, they're still relative, putting matte boxes on and rails, and you have to build the whole thing out every single time. You want something that's very handheld, that's portable, that's ready to go, and you can shoot social media content really smooth and seamlessly. However, why would I want the GH6 over the GH5 that can also do that same feature? Well, another thing I really like about the GH6 is that they finally, like for the non-anamorphic codecs, so I'm going to go to just like the traditional codecs. If you just want to shoot pure 16:9, we'll go back to that mindset. They finally got all the codecs to be 10-bit, and all the way up to 60 frames is also 422 color sampling. And I find that extremely valuable compared to the GH5, which only had 8-bit, I think, 60. But certainly didn't have 422, and it didn't have 10-bit for all the frame rates. I don't think you can do 10-bit 4K 120. I think the 120 mode on here, which it does have, which is a nice benefit, is 8-bit, or it might just be 420 color sampling. I'd have to check on that. But basically, all the formats, the file formats, they've streamlined and made them all more or less uniform. So you're not making these huge sacrifices where you're shooting 24 and it's 10-bit, but then when you switch to 60, it's now 8-bit, and it's kind of a nightmare. It's why I never really shot Vlog. It was Vlog L, and it just had these compromised codecs where I wanted to shoot my real-time stuff, but then all my slow-mo B-roll was, affected, and even the computers that, I was dealing with a couple years ago just couldn't handle the 10-bit footage. Now that, computers have kind of caught up a little bit, they've got these really nice codecs built in that are all more or less uniform, and you can kind of pick and choose, okay, which one do you want? What do you want your settings to be? Do you want all I? Do you want what level of compression? The formatting and codec options make the GH6 a clear upgrade from the GH5 that was kind of like half were really good, half were kind of like so-so, and you always felt like you weren't quite getting, you had to make these choices between like, well, what frame rate do I want to film in for what kind of quality am I going to capture? The other thing I really like about the GH6 that, again, it's not very common in a lot of cameras. It certainly wasn't an option in the GH5, was the ability to punch in and check focus during recording. Not an issue if you have a monitor as much, because most monitors can do it, but just that ability right in the camera to be able to double tap the screen just to punch in to check focus during recording is so helpful. A lot of cameras, you can do it before you record, but the moment you hit the record button, it's like, oh no, you can't punch in anymore. And knowing that, your critical focus is, you're perfectly tack sharp is so, so important during recording. That's like when you need to know, make sure that you're in focus. And so many cameras will be like, well, you can't tell. You can do it before or after, but not during. And that was so frustrating on the GH5 because you'd hit record and if you're looking at the tiny little screen and you're like, is it in focus? I can't really tell. I'll trust that it is. GH6, all that just kind of goes away and you can just punch in while you're recording to check focus. And it's so, so, so nice. The other thing that I really like about the GH6 is I mentioned it before, but you can charge with the USB-C port. So I always found that frustrating on the GH5 that you couldn't add really easily any kind of like external power supply if you wanted to run for like a really long record time. So like, let's say you were doing some kind of live event where you can't really stop, mid recording, or at least it's not ideal, right? So memory cards are plenty big nowadays, 256, 512, you can get like a terabyte on an SD card. That's not really the problem anymore. And as long as you have a camera that doesn't limit your recording time, which the GH6 does not, you can record basically continuously. The final factor was always battery. So in a lot of scenarios in the past on the GH5, you have to get a dummy battery and plug in, kind of like the GH5 is right here. So it's plugged in, it's hardline, but then it's kind of fixed. You're trapped next to the power outlet or wherever you ran the extension cord, and now you're not mobile anymore. You're not portable, and that's kind of the benefit of these cameras. Well, now that I've got the battery on the bottom and I can always be recharging, basically the internal battery is still in here. And I'm basically trickle charging the internal battery. That may or may not be best for battery life and performance long term. I'm not really sure, but it works for me because basically I could record 2, 3, 4 hours uninterrupted, and I don't have to worry about the battery dying. Certain situations, like if you did have like a critical power failure where like the power got pulled for whatever reason, even if I unplugged this USB, like there's still a battery inside the camera, so nothing is going to die immediately. It's almost like a safety backup, that internal one, where other systems in the past I'd have a dummy battery, but if like the power got interrupted, you corrupt the whole clip, and depending on how long you're recording, it's just a nightmare, and you're always worried like, oh, please don't let this happen. Now I've never had a problem with the GH6, and it just works great because I have basically not infinite, I have to recharge the Anton Bauer one, but I have very, very long lasting battery life. And theoretically, even if I swap that, I'm not turning the camera off because again, it has that internal battery. So I could swap this and maintain that continuous charge. You don't have to charge off of something, big and expensive like this Anton base. You could have your typical kind of cell phone rechargeable kind of battery thing that like you can find at like airports and everywhere. I'm sure you probably have 5 of them at your house that are just there, just extra batteries lying around. So it's really nice that you can record, forever without the battery being the limitation. Of course, the card would be the limitation ultimately. And I really like the design of the LCD flip screen. So I've always appreciated the flip out reversible screen like I've got here on the GH5, but on the GH6 they added this extra like tilt level. That's really, really nice. That tilt helps so much if you're filming up here and you're looking at the monitor and you just want to look down and do like a little punch in, critical focus while you're recording. It's just a really nice spot for it to tilt up and still flip out. Super small, little minor detail, but I really like that design and I'm glad they embraced it. I think there's a few other cameras that kind of had screens like that before, but it just makes sense. It's a great way to have an LCD screen built. And I like the size of the GH6, very similar to the GH5, and in that way it feels familiar. All the buttons are in the right spot. The menu is kind of streamlined and updated, so the GH5 Mark II got the update, and a lot of the newer Lumix cameras have their new menu system. But the GH5, the original, still had this kind of like older menu system that was a little bit clunkier. I think the new one, while still not as nice as the Blackmagic menu system, which is like perfect touchscreen, like it's a joy to use the Blackmagic menu. The GH5 still has all the stuff in the right spot and has all the things you would want in the menu as far as like waveforms and histogram, and the audio is really nice. I can actually show you the other camera I've got here built out, and we can talk about audio because this is a good place to do it. I should also mention a helpful thing that I like to do is have these little lens pouches, so you can see how that's on the lens, and it's just it's just lens cloth microfiber, but it's built like a pouch, and I really like just draping that right over the front of the camera lens as opposed to like a lens cap or something else that, you know, easily gets lost, and once it's off it doesn't serve a purpose. I like the microfiber right there. That way you can clean stuff up if you need to. The other thing I've embraced is just the fixed NDs. I used to use the variable NDs quite a bit, but ended up running into issues with polarization, and the skies would look weird. And so I think for quality, I've just switched to just the fixed static NDs. And typically what I end up doing with the GH6 is I'll shoot Vlog, because again, it's 10-bit, it's 422 color sampling for all the modes that I use typically. And if I'm outside, it's usually about like ND64 is kind of where it's at outdoors. If you're running base ISO, I'm not using dynamic range boost all that often. Sorry, I'm going off on kind of a tangent, but I think it's good information. Dynamic range boost is a cool feature, and it's nice to have, I suppose. Theoretically, it brings you from like 12 stops of dynamic range in Vlog to 13, gives you an extra stop of highlight protection. And I think there's some people online who have done testing to confirm that. However, when you switch to that dynamic range boost, when you're boosting your dynamic range, your base ISO is now 2000. And for me, it just introduced too much noise into the image that I don't think the trade-off is worth it. One stop of extra dynamic range is not worth me having grainier, noisier footage that just doesn't look as clean. So I've stopped boosting. I did some testing, and if you're kind of shooting overexposed a little bit, the noise might be more subtle and not as bothersome. So there's certainly situations where it might be helpful if you have a ton of light already and you're kind of shooting overexposed, exposing to the right. But for me, in general, I just avoid the boosting. It gives me a lot more flexibility in my ISO. I can go up to 2000 if I need to, but really having that base at like 250 is far more helpful. So when I go outside, ND64, ISO 250, and that's usually pretty good at like a 2.8 or f4, depending on the day, the time, what you're filming. It's all variable, right? But in general, ND64 works great. And then if I go indoors, I can just take the ND64 off, which I wish I could avoid this, right? The pain of unscrewing a filter. I've looked at other situations. I've got a product in there that has like the flip away, which works great if you have a longer lens. You can just flip the ND filter out of the way. But on a wider lens, it adds too much bulk, and you end up seeing it in the corners. It vignettes a little bit. So I just unscrew that, and then you'll see I also have on here, this is the Tiffin Black Satin. This is the 8th. On the wider lens, I use the 1/4. But I really like the Tiffin Black Satin. If you're familiar with the Black Pro Mist or just Pro Mist or any kind of diffusion filter for your camera lens, I feel like when they're subtle, they're really valuable. They can really quickly be overdone, and it just makes everything look kind of blurry. But I really like how the Black Satin looks. That's a Tiffin product. I think there's some other filter manufacturers that have something similar. But for whatever reason, I just prefer the Black Satin. I think it kind of like looks nice. It adds kind of a little bloom to the footage. There isn't one on this camera, but I'm probably going to do that eventually. I just need the filter ring, the step-up ring for this lens, because it's a newer lens. It's a 9mm and it's a 55 thread, so I don't have a 55-82 yet. But that's all a bunch of nonsense that you don't care about. I'm going to keep talking about the GH6 and the audio. Let's get back to the audio. So on this rig, this is the other GH6, you can see I've got the XLR adapter. This is the old XLR adapter that worked for the GH5, but it still works for the GH6. And what's cool is that the GH6 can record 4 tracks of audio, where the GH5 could only record 2. So what ends up happening is if you attach this XLR adapter, which works really well, it's just powered by the hot shoe, actually. There's no battery, there's nothing to charge or to plug in, just right on the hot shoe from the camera. It supplies power. It's got phantom power for any microphones that need phantom power, and it's got 2 XLR inputs. So that's 2 extra channels of audio that you can use to your advantage. Now, those are always tracks 3 and 4. I'm pretty sure they're always tracks 3 and 4. So what ends up happening is if you're not using this adapter, you just have blank audio, no audio on tracks 3 and 4, which is really annoying that they did it that way. I really think those tracks should like activate when you turn this on, or even better yet, well, well, I guess it would still even be a different scenario. I'll get to it in a moment. But basically, XLR attached, you activate tracks 3 and 4, and whatever audio you feed to the XLR, that's what gets recorded tracks 3 and 4. And then tracks 1 and 2 would be your internal camera mic, unless you plug something into the mic port, in which case 1 and 2 would be whatever those tracks are. So if you know how to run your signal, you can get 4 individual audio tracks right on a GH6. And you might say, well, why do you need to do that? Just get an external audio recorder or something like that and sync it up later. Well, I am all about efficiency and simplicity and just having less work to do later on if I can avoid it. Why would I want to spend time syncing video and audio when I can do it all right in the camera and just have it ready to go right into editing? Post-production, so much gets shuffled off to post. Oh, we'll fix it in post-production. We'll fix it in post-production. That it's so much better if you can avoid all those problems right from the get-go. So I like that I can record 4 audio channels. And even if I had, the 2 different cameras, like I could, in the old way on the GH5, I could record 2 audio channels on one camera and 2 on another, and then you get your 4. Well, that's fine, but you end up having phasing issues because of the way frame rate sync in editing and audio. It doesn't always quite match up right. And there's workarounds. There's definitely ways to fix phasing issues where it's like it's not off by a frame. It's like subframe, where the audio is just like out of phase a little bit with the way that all the audios run together. So syncing it can be kind of a hassle. And even the workarounds sometimes don't end up working and they like get reset, or you're just very tedious post-production work just trying to make the audio sound good versus a situation where you can run all the audio to one source and get it all recorded kind of in real time, and you're less likely to have those phasing issues. You still could from audio delays, whether you're running stuff wireless versus wired, but in general you're going to avoid that problem more often because it's all recorded to the same source, and now you have a clip. Your footage has the audio right in sync. There's no pluralize to run. There's no sitting there waiting for a bunch of stuff to sync up and then a couple clips don't. It's all right there. And I don't know, it's just really nice feature to have that not a lot of cameras like this offer. It's a small upgrade in a lot of ways, but then once you have it, you're kind of, I think anytime I film on the GH5, I'm like, oh, I'm so limited. I only have 2 tracks of audio, and I want my wireless microphone, but I also want reference audio, which is one thing nice you can do now on the GH6. So theoretically, in the setup that I have currently, this microphone here could just be my reference scratch audio, or just, nat sound if I'm running around, if I'm talking to it, if I'm vlogging, or, a quick, on the street interview. I don't have to mic someone up. I've got a microphone here that's capturing that, but I could still run my wireless, proper lav mics into the mic port and have that as well. So I'm never like limited. I never have to like take a microphone off necessarily and put it on someone else, or worry that like, oh, I don't have reference of the room or the space. And it all just kind of works really well. I do think the XLR adapter appears kind of big and bulky and kind of gets in the way, which is why it's hard to rig this with a monitor as well. You kind of have to do one or the other. I do have a top handle that kind of lets me do both if I really have to, but then the whole rig gets really tall and a little ridiculous looking, and it just kind of defeats the purpose of something that's like a hybrid at that point. But I do really like the quality of those XLR connections and just how the sound sounds. It's really nice. And again, having 4 tracks of audio is way better than just 2. It's doubly better if you want to look at it that way. But I think that's kind of the primary core reasons. I think in general the GH6 sensor does look better. The V-Log color is better. So overall, like, the things are improved. The bit rates are better, so that the final video quality that you're playing with is better. I think it's kind of a shame. Well, I don't know. I can't say that. I do think it's, I don't know, however you want to look at it. They switched the card slots, and I'm still not determined on how I feel about this, but I still run everything SD card. There is like the, CF Express Type B or Type A. I don't know. It's really annoying the way they name these things, but there is the, it's one of these cards right here. I can grab it. One of these. This is CF Express Type B, yeah, so 128. So I got these as part of like the pre-order, promotion. It was free, so I ended up getting 2 of them. I don't ever use them because I have SD cards that are 256, and the way I shoot, that's all I need. I don't need the super high-end modes. I'm not shooting RAW necessarily, which you can do now, or even like ProRes. Like a lot of that stuff, I think in most cases is overkill. If you're doing something that's scripted, storyboarded, and short, yeah, by all means, blow out and have like the absolute best quality. But when you're doing long form stuff, whether it's a documentary or a vlog or an interview or something where you're just recording hours and hours of footage, a lot of those high end codecs and formats just are overkill. You end up eating up so much space on a hard drive, or just burning through cards for the sake of something that's going to be on screen for 30 seconds, but you still needed to record the 2 hours of it. So it's one thing, it's my personal opinion, and my preference is to go with kind of that, like the middle of the road, like best of both worlds. Yeah, you don't want like terrible quality, but you a lot of times don't need the absolute best, because at the end of the day, when someone's watching on YouTube or on their streaming television service, it's all compressed anyway. And unless you're expecting to have problems with color grading and exposure, and having to boost lighting, or you have to punch in a lot to reframe stuff, like those are all problems, and I would rather shoot without having those problems to begin with. That way, and then you can use the lighter weight codec and you still have a beautiful, gorgeous end product, compared to something that's like, oh well, I shot it raw so it's fine, and then you end up looking at the final product and you're like, no, that still looks terrible. Like, yeah, you had terabytes of footage and it still looks bad. So my personal preference is just to shoot to kind of like whatever fits the project. Find the process, the workflow that works for what you're doing, and don't just do something the right way that ends up giving you like a giant headache at the end of the day. And you're like, well, why does this take 2 weeks to do such a simple task? It's like, well, you're kind of doing it the wrong way. Even though it's the right way, it ends up being the wrong way. I did see a chat from Jeff. Says, it's been too long. Great to see you. Have you noticed any of the strong light banding artifacts on your GH6? I haven't noticed the strong light banding. I haven't done any testing on that though either. So it certainly could be an issue that people are running into, but it hasn't been an issue on anything I've personally shot. And I've shot a lot now with the GH6. I've had it since it came out, which I don't even remember when it came out, but it's been a while. I've gotten very comfortable with the camera. I feel right at home coming from the GH5 to the GH6. Easy upgrade. And I think at the time it was kind of like, am I going to get the money back out of it, right? Is it worth the upgrade, or is this just marginal? And I think on paper it might look less than it feels, right? When you're looking at a features list and it says, oh, now it's got, 10-bit this, or now you can do 422 that, or hey, now it's got these, like extra little bells and whistles. All of it feels really like subtle. It's not like, hey, now you have 8K, or hey, now you have perfect autofocus like everyone wanted. Overall, it feels very like small, minor upgrades, but to me, that's like the refinement, the polishing of this gradual evolution. I mean, I come from having the GH1 that I hacked like over 10 years ago now. That camera, I fell in love with it at the time because it just did so much more than any of the other, DSLRs that were coming out. And it's funny that I'm still on this path with Lumix, because I have no allegiance, I have no loyalty. They just keep making cameras that are these incredible Swiss Army knife workhorses for video and photo, like the perfect hybrid cameras. And so when you look at the GH6 over the GH5, it's just the next step in refinement of that process, polishing all these things to make it work that much better, that much smoother, just being more intuitive, like feeling like you now have access to all this stuff that before you kind of were like, you were working around and you didn't really know you were working around it on the GH5. You're always able to make good content and find a way. But now it just seems like all those barriers are kind of pulled out of the way, and you can just kind of shoot the way you want to shoot, and you have all the tools and resources you always wanted, and anything you want to do, the camera just does. That peace of mind is really nice. And then also the added value of like, yes, the footage does look better. It is improved. I think on paper, it's a little bit more of like subtle improvements, where in like actual practice, it feels a lot more dramatic. Where if it was like, hey, you got to get rid of your GH6 and go back to the GH5, I would feel like a lot was missing, making that step backwards, even though I didn't feel like I was gaining all that much more, making the move up. One thing I will, talk about is the autofocus stuff. I had an A7S 3. I sold it. It does good autofocus, but it also is autofocus, and it sometimes does things you don't want it to do. So, like, you can use it if you have to, but I was using the autofocus on the A7S 3 and just was like, I actually could do better than this because I'm not going to make these dumb decisions. Like, autofocus is not intelligent focus. And that was like the biggest like wake up call for me, because you see these amazing tests online of perfect eye tracking and, oh my gosh, look how good this looks. Yes, in a perfect environment where you have your subject, they're in the frame, they're in the, and you can see their eyes. Great. What happens when like they turn their back? And it's like, well, now we have head tracking. Okay, great. What happens if someone else walks in front of them? Immediately, like the autofocus like tries to track this other person. What happens if you go behind a bush or you go behind a car or something interrupts the frame? Like, those are the moments where no person would like ever try and adjust their focus, but the autofocus would, always seem to be like, oh no, I need to focus on this new thing. And that's where it looked more, in those moments, it looks like a mistake. It looks like an error, versus when you're manually focusing. And now that you can punch in while you're recording on the Gh6, the like just manual focus looks so much more organic. It looks, I don't know, like more like art, I guess. Like, and that's really a pretentious way to say it. I don't mean it to sound that way, but it's like more forgiving. As the viewer, I'm more forgiving of like something being out of focus and coming into focus, or being in focus and drifting out and then back in, when it's all done with that manual finesse. When it's like auto and you see it like jump to the background and then back to the subject, or even for a moment, or just like, glitch for a second, it immediately takes you out of it as the viewer, where like I've never really seen a person, focus that aggressively and that strangely, where an autofocus system will definitely have those moments. I mean, for the most part, like 95% of the time they're great. It's that 5% of the time that like ruins the shot, because you don't accept it. Your brain doesn't process it. It jolts you out of it, like any kind of error would. Whereas a lot of the manual focus problems of like, oh, it's difficult. Okay, but like learn how to be better then, like learn how to do it. And I know there's situations where you can't if you're on a gimbal or something, but oftentimes I'm not shooting on a gimbal. Like, I don't shoot that way all that often. So it's not something I have this strong need for. And I would much rather have all the benefits of the GH6 compared to, some of these, like, yes, it's full frame. These other full frame cameras, it's like, oh, well, the GH6 is micro four thirds. It's like, yes, but I mean, that means the lenses are nice and compact. Everything's like relatively affordable, and you have all these amazing features. And at the end of the day, even if you're shooting full frame, are you really shooting at like a 1.2 or a 1.8 aperture? No, most people are shooting full frame, are stopping down to like an f4 or a 5.6 because of the depth of field. In which case, like, you're right in micro four thirds territory anyway, as far as like what you can achieve similarly with depth of field. I think nowadays, like, a lot of people are well past the like, oh, blurry background bokeh. Like this is a blurry background, and it's a GH5 with a 9mm lens. It's at a 1.7. If I move just ever, a little bit, like, it's out of focus. There's that the depth of field here is shallow, and you get the blurry background and you get the wide angle look. Like, it's all possible with micro four thirds. I just think people, put too much weight on these things that are, at the end of the day, kind of like preference. If you want it or you need it for your use case, that's fine. But it's certainly not something to write off a camera because, like, oh, it's not full frame, oh, it's only, it's a 2x crop or whatever. What does it matter? Use what works and gives you the tools to do the job. And I feel like the Lumix cameras always give me all the tools. Or like the Canon cameras or the Sony cameras or some of these other ones, there's always these like compromises. Or even the A7S III, aside from autofocus, not being, this the holy grail of like, solutions. I also was disappointed with the megapixels. Like, 12 megapixels isn't that much. When you're making thumbnails and you're taking pictures, having only 12 megapixels doesn't really make it a hybrid. It's like, that's a video camera. And I know there's newer ones like the A7 IV, and there's some There's always cameras coming out, and it's hard to keep up to date with all of them, especially when you find something like the GH6 that just works so well and does what you need it to do. But I just try and stay in tune with everything and follow the news and what else is coming out. And I don't know, it's an interesting spot that we're in, because cameras have gotten so good over the last like 5 years, that like they're all kind of perfect. Whether you like Sony or Canon or Lumix or Nikon or Fuji or Olympus, like they're all really good. And I don't think any of them is a mistake. I don't think any of them are bad. They're all really, really good. So it's just like, which one do you want? Which one do you want to pick? It's like going to like Home Depot and like someone's like, oh, I like DeWalt. And someone's like, oh, I like Milwaukee. And someone else is like, I like Ryobi. And it's like about power tools. Like they're just brands that have their little special way of building things. And I don't know. I as a layman don't really notice that much of a difference between different power tools, and it's like they all kind of look the same. I think cameras are kind of in that same spot where we've just gotten them all. They're all doing 4K now, thankfully. That was the biggest gripe for a while, right? These cameras that were still doing 1080, and you're like, come on, let's upgrade. But now it's like, oh, now we've got 8K, and it's like, all right, cool. Like, well, 4K is still really good. I don't know if that's always going to be the case forever, but for now, 4K, 5K, 6K, all very usable, all very workable. I don't think anyone's looking at it going like, there's not enough resolution. I need more resolution. Dynamic range is similar, right? It used to be that, oh, I need all this dynamic range because cameras had like 8 stops or 9 stops. Now they've got 12 and 14 and 15 and 17 and arguably 20, in some cameras in some cases. But for the most part, the GH6 having 12, stops of dynamic range for the most part is plenty. It's going to make beautiful footage, especially now that lighting is so affordable as well. That's a whole other half of the equation, that a lot of the image, it doesn't really matter what the camera is. Are you lighting the scene? And Aperture and Amaran and Godox and all these lighting brands that have really quality LED lights that are relatively affordable. Like that wasn't a thing 5 or 10 years ago. And so much has just gotten to this point where like the technology is finally caught up with the ability to create the art, that it really just comes down to the artist now. It's not about the tools anymore, really, from my perspective. Get the tool that does the job you need it to do. And that's always been the case. That's what everyone's always said. But now, it used to be that you had maybe like 3 options. There were like 3 strong options. Like these are the only 3. Everything else is garbage. These are the 3 good things. Now it's like, yeah, go on Amazon, look up LED lighting, and most of them are pretty good. Look at cameras, what's new, what's out, what lenses do you have, what system do you want to invest in, and yeah, you'll probably be fine. I don't think there's any like wrong choices anymore because they're all doing such good work. It's just, for me, the GH6 does all the things that I want it to do for my special needs. Like the scenarios I find myself in most often are scenarios where I want the GH6, and other cameras don't quite do the job I need them to. So having that, like I said, Swiss Army knife of cameras is so helpful. I'm going to check in the chat here again. Rhett says, yo, sir, I was just watching some of your videos on the SLR Magic 2X and wondering if you made content still. Well, yes, Rhett. I don't make content. I make plenty of content. It's just not always on this channel, and it's not about me all the time. That's something I've tried to do over the last couple of years, is instead of just being another YouTuber, finding ways to make different types of content that, from my perspective, aren't really being made all that much. So that's what I found myself busy with. Do a ton of client work, do all sorts of work. It's just not always here on this YouTube channel. So this is a rare, event, but someone asked, in the comments, so hey, might as well. Agree about the spec boost. People have said that it's only a small upgrade for pretty much every GH camera, but there's just as many that counter and say, well, there's so many improvements, it adds up. Yeah, it's really hard to explain without giving someone the camera and letting them experience. And even then, you have to kind of tell people that these things do exist, because they're not immediately obvious. It's not something that you can put on a product page and say, hey, here's why you should buy this camera. It's all these like really small little things that no one would even care to mention. But then once you learn you can do it, you're like, oh, wow, that's brilliant. That's great. I love that. I'm probably forgetting some right now for the very nature because I'm doing a live stream. But there's so much in the GH6 that while they might be small little upgrades, they do all add up. And then you feel it when you go back to a GH5 and you go, oh yeah, I can't do that, or oh yeah, it's only this way, or oh I forgot. I don't, small little stuff, but really really beneficial to the way I work. Flip says, morning, great to see you here. Greetings from Switzerland. Hello. I think, it's Philip. I said Flip, but it's Philip Michael Safre. Nice. All usable except for Canon and crippled RF mount. What's the other channel? Missed you, bro. There's lots of channels that I work on. I don't know. Maybe we'll go into that another time, but yeah, the internet is a fun place, and I think you should create the content that you want to make. YouTube and even like this, a stream is, everyone kind of does that to some degree, I suppose. It's very similar, and you can have your own spin on it, and certainly people are more talented than others, and your favorites stand out. But I wanted to find a way to make the content I wanted to make that didn't exist in my bedroom or in my office, my current space. I was feeling like, okay, yeah, I can talk to a camera in my office and do what everyone else in the space kind of does. But at the end of the day, if you're a filmmaker and you're just making films about telling other people how to make films, what are you doing? It's just this big circle, So I wanted to start making, not films. I never wanted to go to Hollywood and make movies necessarily, but I've always wanted to work on the craft and make something interesting and unique. And so that's why I challenged myself 2 years ago. Find, what do you want to do? What do you want to be doing? Because the worst thing would be to be successful doing something you hate, right? So a lot of people want to chase the algorithm and just to make money. And then they get stuck and they get trapped doing something that they did to be successful, but now that they're successful, they have to keep doing it. And that would be probably the worst thing I can imagine, doing something that you hate and being stuck and being successful at it. So my chair keeps slipping down. 1 second. And so I challenged myself to, if I could do anything, what would I do for free forever? And do that, make that content. And so that's what I started doing a couple of years ago, and it's worked out. It's great. But it's challenging, and it's got its own unique dilemmas that, again, I'll go into probably some other time. But I would encourage anyone to do that. Find what and it's hard. You don't always know what you want to do. You think you want something, and then you realize, oh, I don't actually want that. It's a common problem that I think all humans face, because we're so distracted by success and money and fame and fortune, and all these things are very yeah, I want that. But then you realize well, but I don't like the process of getting that thing, right? Everyone wants to be rich, but how did you get rich, and how do you stay rich? Do you want to keep doing that thing, or would you rather be poor doing what you love? and obviously you want to be rich doing what you love. And so find that. What would you do every day even if it meant you stayed poor? Do that and find a way to make you, not rich, but well off. Find a way to turn it into a business, to monetize it, to make it work for you. And that wake up for me was really good, because I always thought I wanted to work for other people and be really good at production and have clients, and someone comes in and they've got money and they want to make a cool thing, and I say, yes, I can do that. But then I started realizing yeah, I'm good at that. I can do that, and I still do. But what do I want to make? What do I want to see in the world? All these other people get to see what they want. But what do I want? And I'm the one that's got the talent and the skill and the ability to do it. So all it takes is my time. Do that. And I would encourage everyone to do that. Find the thing that you want to do, that you love doing, that you would do for free, and do that, and find a way to make it work. That's, I don't know, been one of the best things that's happened to me over the last 2 to 3 years. And I still really enjoy this. It's not, don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't want to do live streams or don't want to make video content. I do. I just don't want to be another drop in the bucket of all the people reviewing equipment on the internet or doing live streams, or just all doing the same stuff. Like, I'm sure it's like, oh, I've seen that. I know about that camera. Why do I need to watch his video on the GH6? I know all about it. If you like the person, yeah, you might want to hear their take, but do we need more people? I feel like maybe the GH6, sure, because it's not super popular, but I don't know that we need more people telling other filmmakers how to make films, but really, like, none of us are making films. We're just making tutorials and YouTube videos. Nothing wrong with that, but I just want to kind of break out of that a little bit and do stuff that's, I don't know, not that. Which, again, nothing wrong with it. It's just a moment I had of being like, what value is this? What am I adding? Is just another person talking about a product valuable, or would it be more valuable if I made something new that, like, didn't exist before and is 100% unique? That's my personal preference. That's what I like. Let's see. Use the GH6 and the GH6 and the S5, and I just keep going back to Micro Four Thirds. So I bought an S5 and I returned it because the S5 felt like a sideways move from the GH5. And if you watched my streams at the time or my video content, this was 2 years ago, I had the GH5 and I was craving this upgrade, this feeling of like, okay, I've had the GH5 for, like, I think at that point 5 years or something, like 4 years maybe, something in there. And it's like, I'm ready for an upgrade. I feel like I've mastered this camera. I've gotten everything out of it. What's next? A7S III, R5, S5, S1H. And at one point, I tested all those cameras, and one of them was the S5, and I felt like, man, this is just like a full frame GH5. That's cool if you want or need full frame, but, like, I already have a GH5. Why am I just trading one thing for the other? Where, like, the GH6 feels like that natural progression of, like, the actual upgrade, then moving forward, and it scratched that itch for me of, like, needing something new that was better, and it gave me new challenges to figure out and new tools to unlock. Because that's the thing, even with the GH5, it's still so powerful that a GH6 needed to actually be an upgrade, because you can still do so much with the GH5, and I still use it. It's not dead by any means. Like, I would still recommend someone to go buy a GH5, not even the Mark II, just the regular old base GH5 that came out 5 years ago. Yeah, still a great camera. Go buy it. If you can't afford the GH6, because you could probably get 2 GH5s for the price of one GH6. And if it was money, if that was the issue, yes, 2 GH5s, way better than one GH6 if you're in a scenario where you need multiple cameras. So if it's that kind of budgeting thing, GH5 still holds up. You can do so much with that camera, and low light's not an issue. Autofocus isn't an issue. Like, these are all things that they're not even workarounds. It's just knowing how to do the work. It's funny. Like, this lighting setup right here on this GH5 is a tiny. I can't really pull it off because it's all screwed on. Here, I could point you at it though. So, like, look, that dinky little light, and it's a GH5, right? Granted, this light back here, I mean, it's just an edge light. It's not doing much, but that's the only light in this room is this light, and I guess my computer monitor a little bit. But, like, you don't need much. Just a little bit is all you need. And ISO 400, shooting at a 1.7. How's my exposure now? Am I a little bright? I don't know. You tell me. It always change. It's always different on the stream end versus, like, what I'm looking at with the HDMI input. But you don't need a lot. That light, I think, was like $30 or something like that. It's nothing. And people say, oh, but it's bad in low light. The GH5 is bad in low light. Well, like, give it some light then. Like, would you do? Oh yeah, you're gonna get it no light. That's not a way to film. Like, are you filming in the dark? Then use a night vision camera. You know what I mean? It's so silly, these things that are like always those sticking points, those pain points for people. Like, oh, it's bad at this. It's like, but it's not. You're just setting it up for failure in a lot of ways. Doing something you hate, but you are great. R is a common problem, not just YouTube. I love your comment. Philip, yeah, it's true. Don't get stuck doing what you hate. Find something you love and do that instead. And I'm going to shift that back over the way it was. By the way, I think Gerald Dunn is maybe in this situation. Oh, yeah, I haven't watched his recent. I saw Gerald just did something on the FX30, but I didn't watch the video. I think that there's like a value. Okay, so information is valuable. Learning, education, it's all super important. And how is anyone going to know how to do anything if there's not someone teaching them? So in the YouTube space, the easiest, most SEO friendly, most algorithm friendly type stuff is the like, hey, this new thing came out that everyone cares about. Here's my take on it. And over the years, more and more people have done that, and there's people that are really good at it. Like Gerald's awesome at it, but then you end up all doing the same kind of stuff, and it's like you're doing it, it could be a studio space, it could be your office, it could be whatever, but I think it ultimately becomes kind of like limiting, and then everyone is just talking about learning the art of filmmaking, but then all those people are using those skills just to make other YouTube videos that are other tutorials teaching the art of filmmaking. And it's like, where are the films? Where is the art? Where is the new creation? And I'm not saying it has to be scripted with actors or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's so many types of video content that so many people have like the best, most amazing cameras and the best skills because they've been watching YouTube for almost 20 years. I don't know how old's YouTube, 15 years, something like that. There's so many people that know so much. And it's like, put those skills to use making something that you want to see. Do you want to see another gear review video? Maybe, if it's creative and it's fun and you can breathe some fresh air into it. That's what I tried to do. Comica. I don't even know how you say their name. That's these guys. The VM10. They sent me this. This is the VM10 Pro. It's a new kind of shotgun microphone. The windscreen's on there, but it's really small. Here, I'll show you. These guys, Comica. I don't know how you say it. But they sent that to me and they wanted me to do some content on it and do a review. So I was like, sure, yeah. It's a great microphone. Sounds good. It's only like $50 or something like that. I don't think you can buy it yet, but it's coming out soon. It's only like $50. Great sounding microphone. I actually have a bunch of their other microphones that I've used in the past, and that's why I'm like happy to, make a video. And so I tried to make it, something new or interesting or that I hadn't really seen before. But at the end of the day, it's a video telling you about a product. There's lots of those videos. What am I using the product for that isn't just a vicious cycle telling you about the product? What other audio could I go capture that isn't just a review of the microphone itself? Where could I take this? What could I capture? What sounds? What content? What dialogue? That's what I'm interested in, finding those things that people haven't, not that they haven't seen it before, but that it wouldn't exist otherwise, because there's no reason for it to exist. That's the biggest problem, is that when people start doing something that works for SEO or the algorithm, then everyone jumps on board and just does that thing. And you get this tunnel vision where you think, oh, that's what I need to be doing too, because that's what's working. That's what's popular. And the problem is, it just makes that lane really crowded. And there's all this other room that no one's even looking at because no one knows that it's even possible to be popular or successful, because it doesn't exist. It's not a thing. And that's a really hard thing for, I think, a lot of humans to grasp, as we gravitate towards what is proven possible. Someone does something, like vlogging. Someone does it and we realize, oh, this is popular. People like this. Let's all do it. And then they lose sight of like any other creative stuff outside of vlogging or being a YouTuber, being an influencer. Like, it's not possible until the first person does it. I think there's a phenomenon where, world records are really, really hard to break. And then the moment someone breaks a world record, like 10 other people break it at the same time. It's like this like psychological phenomenon where like we don't think it's possible until someone shows that it's possible. And then the moment our brains see that it's possible, we're like, oh yeah, I can do that too. I think there's a similar thing where you have to peel yourself away a little bit and look for those opportunities to do something truly like, what do you want to do, and go do that. Don't spend a bunch of money doing it. Just invest your time and effort and find a way to make that. And if it's video or if it's photography, like one of the best things is just if someone else is doing it, don't do that. That's probably the best thing as far as like being successful and finding what you want to do. Find the thing, think of the thing you want to do that no one else is doing. If someone's doing it, don't do it. Let's see. So Gerald, and then Ramier. Man, that's a great story. I work for a company making content here on YouTube. Money is good, but honestly, I find it hard to keep making the content. I haven't made anything for myself in 10 years. And that's where I found myself. I wasn't working for a company that was doing YouTube videos, but I was always creating someone else's vision. And I still do that. There's value in like if you're a home builder and you're building homes for other people, you're always creating someone else's vision. It would be such a shame to have the skills to build a home and never build a home for yourself. And I feel like that's lost a lot in like service industries, because I think video production's a service, right? It's classified as that. It's like you're serving all these other people doing what they want, and you're never doing it for yourself. Find a way to do it for yourself and what you want that to be. And again, it doesn't have to be Hollywood. It doesn't have to be short films. It could be documentaries. It could be vlogs. It could be YouTubing. It could be TikToking. It could be anything. It's just something that you find fun and unique and drives you. And it doesn't even have to be a commitment. It could just be a one-off thing, right? Not everything has to be big and grow and be successful. The best thing I realized was that when I do things that I want to do, I never regret them, because I did them because I wanted to do them. The times that I did stuff to make money or to go viral or because someone, paid me to do it, that's always the stuff that I looked back on and I was like, man, why did I do that? Because like you never make enough money, you never do go viral, and you're just doing what someone else is telling you to do. And usually they're not going to give you enough money. They're not going to give you the right time or the resources. They're going to kind of give you this like low budget and expect you to make an iPhone commercial. And you do all this work for these people with all their limitations and their strings attached, and you go, man, am I proud of that? You're like, I did the best I could, but when you show it to other people, they don't know all the limitations behind the scenes. So it always comes with that caveat, that excuse of like, well, but I only had a day, or like, but they had like no budget, and it's like you can't explain that away every time you show someone a video. What's the stuff that you can do for yourself in a vacuum that you're like, I like this? And we put it out there and someone can be like, that sucks, I hate it. And you'd be like, well, that's okay, because I like it. And then guess what? You'll find other people who like it too. Because if at least one person likes something, if you like it, chances are there's other people that like it too. The worst thing is to do stuff for other people, thinking other people will like it. Well, I'll do it this way because I think that's what people like. And you say, okay, but do you like it? And they go, oh no, I don't like it, but I think other people will like it. Well, chances are in that scenario, no one likes it. So the best thing, make it for yourself first, do what you like. Then you have no regrets. You have no excuses. You just say, yeah, I like this. I think this is good. And chances are other people will think it's good too. And I figured that out a couple years ago, and it's been very life-changing. Philip says, I like your perspective about uniqueness. Thank you, Philip. Just someone just upgraded to a Sony full frame. It will be interesting to test that out and compare it against what I was used to. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the Sony cameras. They're great cameras. They just don't do what I need them to do in certain situations, and that's why I pick other tools most of the time for the job. But I would definitely use a Sony if that's what, if the job called for. Absolutely. They're great. Same with Canon, same with Red, same with Arri, same with Nikon. They all have their uses and their value and strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes their strengths are their weaknesses, and sometimes their weaknesses are their strengths. It just depends on the project. Same comment. I have Comico Wireless Rf Mic, which is a great big range sound and cheap. Yeah. So the Comico Wireless, is it the RF? Yeah. The ones that are like the 2.4 gigahertz, they're fantastic. They work great. The one thing you want to do is upgrade the actual lav mic itself. So the capsule, I wish I had one here that I could grab. It's actually like behind me, but I'm not going to go back there. So yeah, usually like if you get a good microphone, like the lavalier mic itself, most wireless packs nowadays are all pretty good. Some are better than others, and I tend to like the RF ones instead of the UHF. The traditional like microphone frequencies and the way they all used to operate, for whatever reason, always gives me issues. Like I always get interference and static, and you can rescan for channels, and you're supposed to have these radio waves to use, right? But if it is the RF, I don't know, maybe I'm getting the terminology wrong, but the 2.4 gigahertz microphones where it's just like the pack is transmitting to the receiver and like that connection over like 2.4 gigahertz, those usually work great and they're super clean. And as long as you have that good lavalier, like it'll sound really, really good I've had way less issues than any like the UHF packs that I've had, even like the nice premium professional Sennheiser packs. Like, you go to a location, you're just scanning for frequencies because everything sounds like static garbage. Where I've had far less issues with 2.4 gigahertz. They do have problems sometimes, right? Any wireless scenario is open to problems, right? If there's a lot of signal in the area, maybe there's a bunch of Wi-Fi routers or something, or multiple audio packs, it can be a challenge for sure. That's really only avoided by like really, really high-end systems. But for like the cheap, affordable stuff, I think those 2.4 gigahertz ones are great. I really like your mind setting about creation. Thank you, Philip. And I produce mostly classical music video content, trailer, concert, opera, and I love it. I have my YouTube channel as a musician, not a YouTuber. That's great, Philip. That's awesome. Do what you love. And I'm going to wrap it up there. I bought the GH6. I bought 2 of them because I really love the GH5. And I've fallen in love with the GH6. It does everything I want it to do and so much more. And there's a few things I wish it had. I wish it had some kind of internal electronic ND filter that's becoming, very popular and quite cool in some high-end cameras and some not high-end cameras. But an internal electronic ND filter would be great. Would better autofocus be great? Yes, absolutely. I would take it, and I think it should be there. But everything else it does is I'm quite content with the GH6, and I don't have a desire to immediately upgrade or throw it away, or I need full frame, or it's the dynamic range is bad, or no. The GH6 and the GH5 before it are incredible cameras, and that's pretty much all I've talked about on YouTube. I think for like 5 years is these Lumix cameras, but it's because I think they're so valuable and so underrated. Like they're not popular. Most people are shooting Sony or Canon. And I don't know if they don't try the Lumix stuff or they just don't know what it can do. The anamorphic stuff alone, I think, should be a selling point for most people, just because of the way social media is nowadays and everything's vertical, but you still want horizontal and you don't want to do stuff twice. So shoot it all at once. That's an obvious selling point. And there's no reason Sony and Canon couldn't do it. They could just enable you to record 4x3 and film open gate, but they don't, as far as I'm aware. I haven't seen the camera from Sony or like at the the prosumer, the consumer level, the affordable level. Lumix, you can do it on like a $400 or $500 camera. It's not a price thing. It's like, yep, the camera's capable. It can do it. Here you go. You can shoot anamorphic now, and it's like, great. I'm not going to shoot anamorphic. I'm going to go shoot open gate, same thing. I'm going to use it for a very different purpose. Instead of anamorphic being like ultra wide, it's very ironic. It's very funny. Anamorphic, the goal is to be ultra wide, but I'm using anamorphic mode because I want vertical video. And that's what's so funny about it. But once you change your mindset on that and you realize, oh, the camera is just cropping 16:9 anyway. So why wouldn't I just record that extra real estate to begin with? Like, there's no reason not to, it's just like you're getting back what the camera was taking away. So might as well. And Kelvin says, great to see you back. Do another live sometime. Would love a discussion on business, working with a team, sharing pain, responsibilities on projects. Yeah, could do something like that. It's all very, my short answer is find something that works for you and makes sense. A lot of people do things because it's how they're done, just like I was saying before about the right way to do something, the right camera to have, or the right methodology. And a lot of that's the right way to do stuff gets you in the wrong spot, especially with business and relationships. And it's like, well, that's how it's done. That's how you run a company. That's how you pay employees. Well, why does it have to be that way? Find a new way. Like, if that way doesn't work and it sucks and people want to quit, or, you can't afford people, or, whatever the problems are, find all those problems and scoop them up and throw them away and say, okay, we're not going to do that system because it has too many problems. Let's find a new way to do it that works for you and whatever it is that you need done. I think one of the biggest problems is this like hourly mindset of like the hourly wage and how much is someone worth an hour. All hourly pay incentivizes is someone wasting time. And I don't mean that, negatively about like employees or anything, but when you're only paying someone for how many hours they put towards a project, it incentivizes them to take longer and to spend more hours doing it. Or just to show up, for and waste time, like doing a shift or whatever, like to just be there to fill a space. And they're always capped. The only way they make more money is by spending more time. That is the opposite of efficiency. So don't expect things to be done fast when you're paying someone for how many hours they put into it, right? This is just, it's almost so simple that it should be common sense. And yet so many institutions are built on this concept of paying people for their hours. And then all it incentivizes people to do is like spend more time doing things, so take longer. And also like they don't reap the reward of their work because they're just sacrificing more time. So one thing that I've done that I think is incredibly valuable is just, I'm in a unique situation where I know kind of what projects take, like how much time they take and how long they should be. But I'll just do like flat fixed rate stuff. So it's like, hey, if you can get this done, it's like $1,000 project. Let's just say it's $1,000 project. Get it done, and I'll give you $1,000 kind of thing. What does that incentivize? That incentivizes a person to work quicker on it because their time they know is valuable. And if they can let's say they can get that project done in 1 hour, they just made $1,000 an hour. Like, that's insane, right? But that's what it incentivizes. It's that mindset of efficiency. And of course, then your worry is the quality. Well, how do I have quality control? And obviously, you're not going to pay someone for a job not well done. So as long as you have that balance, that equilibrium, you can get a lot of work done and be very successful, I think, and find good relationships where I will pay you this for this task, and it's up to you to figure out what's the best way to get that done. It still needs to be high quality. It still needs to come out the way I expect, but I'm not going to micromanage you and expect you to spend, 100 hours on it because I'm going to pay you for every hour that you're worth. Please get it done in 10 hours. If you can do it in 10 hours, great. I still get the thing that I wanted, which was, $1,000 worth of value. And it only took you 10 hours? Fantastic. Like, that's a win-win scenario every single time. I've never really found the scenario of like the hourly really working out that well, except for things that like you don't really know how many hours they're going to take. So it does provide some like insulation from like, in client projects where there's like 50 extra hours of revisions or something crazy like that. You want to be insulated. You don't want to sign up for a project and then go over and be eating away at your profits because you agreed to a fixed price. So there's always a time and a place, and there's situations where it works well, and there's other times where it doesn't work quite as well. But it just comes down to your project, and to take it back to what I was saying is just find a way that makes sense. Find a way that works. Don't just do it because that's the way it's done. Oh, everyone pays hourly, so that's what I'm going to do. Or everyone pays, a day rate, and that's what I'm going to do. It's like, does that make sense? Like, what's it worth? What's the value? And what's the right incentives? Because that's how people operate. Everyone's driven by incentives. And most people are incentivized to like make the most money by doing the least amount of work, which sounds bad. I think a lot of people look at it like, ooh, that's bad. But it's like, no, that's how everyone works. Like, why would you want to spend a lot of time and not making all that much? You want to like optimize. And so the more money you can make and the less amount of time you can invest in that gives you more opportunity to work on other things and make more money and, get ahead. So finding ways to make all that align and balance out and work well, that's separate from like, oh, well, that's how they do it, so I'm going to do it the same way. Well, if they're doing it one way and they're failing or they're struggling, don't copy them. Find a new way that works for you. And that's really what it like kind of always comes down to. I feel like it's don't do something just because that's how it's supposed to be done. Because usually it's wrong or it wastes time. So I'll end it there. Hopefully that was enjoyable and you learned something about the GH6, or maybe not. Maybe you just like listening. But it was a long live stream, as promised, as requested by that one commenter who wanted me to do a live stream. So your wish has been granted, and I'll happily do another one another time, perhaps. We'll see. But I still exist. I'm still around. I'm still working. I'm still very busy, doing plenty of work, just not always here on my YouTube channel. Because, again, for all the reasons that I discussed, it's fun to stay busy doing new things and different things, and again, not feeling like you have to be, a YouTuber and be just go all in and do this one thing. Find different things that you enjoy. I enjoy this, but I also enjoy doing other things as well. Although I will say it's always revolves around video. That's always been my hobby. I don't do really anything other than video and content creation, which is maybe both a blessing and a curse, a strength and a weakness all combined. Let's see. Last one. Philip, in my line of work, project-based payment is usual, and the faster I work, the better for me. Exactly. That's how it not always should be, but it often should be that way. I think it's a good incentive, a good motivator for people. Get it done fast and efficiently, deliver a quality product, and you'll get that, the full project amount. Everyone's happy. Everyone's a winner. See y'all later. You will not be able to reconnect. See, I'm still